the path back to what it was. He resists.
So what space does in general, classic general...
Can we restart, ladies and gentlemen?
Your inertial thought
Yes, that's right. So
quantum gravity.
yes, it is quantum gravity.
Okay, I've started a hair there, but I've got to start this one. Okay, we're going to have a talk from Barbara Gabrys about an inquiry into reality. Okay, Barbara.
Yes, hello. It's a work in progress. I've been working with Zen, as some of you know, and I'm also a physicist. I used to be a physicist. And it's quite interesting for me to look into different aspects of thought and sensation. So let's have a quick look into what I'm going to do today. First of all, I think we need to have 1 minute about what is the difference between Eastern and Western philosophy. This is very important because unless we look what it is, we are not going to talk coherently about what Kitaro Nishida has done. So, Eastern Western philosophy, who was Kitaro Nishida, what is reality, Zen view of reality, Nishida and reality, and short summary. But summary is a work in progress, so don't take it too seriously. Okay, so, you know, I could write a PhD about differences between Eastern and Western way of thinking, but what is truly the nugget of it, that the Western thought is demonstrative and based on principle of contradiction. So this is logical argumentation and that forms base of science. Without that we cannot have science. But an Eastern philosophy is communication of thought is often imprecise, suggestive and indirect. And that is something which really comes very, very strongly in Zen, as I will give a couple of examples later. And this dichotomy can be illustrated by problems for Westerners who are studying Zen, who are doing koan study. You cannot solve koan by thinking, logic is useless. We say you have to think with your hara. Now, hara is your belly. It's a virtual point inside your body, which is some sort of inch below your navel, and you can think about it as a center of gravity of our body. So in Zen, we are very strongly grounded. We are based in our body. We are talking about body-mind. That's not just body, not just mind. It's the unity, body-mind. And koan is, probably most of you know about koans because it got really sort of prostituted by lots of people who have no idea what it is about. But essentially koans are used as a way of progressing in spiritual development. And each of the koans is something about yourself and you have to show your understanding. So let me leave it at that. Who was Kitaro Nishida? Now, I never heard about him, but my deceased master, my spiritual father, if you like, he was very keen on that I try to bring some of his philosophy into my teaching. And this is truly a hard thing to do. Kitaro Nishida was probably the greatest Japanese philosopher of the last century, and he was somebody who really bridged the Eastern and Western way of thinking. As you can see, when he was born, it was still Meiji era, and Japan was opening to the Western ideas and the Western thought. And he actually studied German philosophers and English philosophers, and that very strongly influenced his work. And what is interesting for us today is that origin of his philosophical thought was attributed to the concept of pure experience, direct experience. And that's William James. Probably most of you have heard about William James. I think at some point we should have something like a talk more dedicated to William James, but not today. What is interesting that Nishida's philosophy was complementary with his Zen practice. And Nishida was an ardent Zen practitioner, and he passed one of the very famous koans, the Mukoan, which it goes essentially, the monk asked Joshu, has a dog called Buddha nature? And Joshu answered, Moo! Okay, I leave it at that, and that takes some people years to solve, obviously, or answer to the satisfaction of the master. And so Nishida's originality lies in reconciliation of the Western and Eastern way of thinking. What I call fuzzy logic of the East, it's not quite, never called like that, but I like to think in terms of fuzzy, so anything between 0 and 1 would do. It was reconciled with the disciplined, rational and logical ways of the West, and that's not a mean feast. So for today, what we are looking at is something that intellectual truth and practical truth must be the same. Now, this is really high order. And his philosophy is very much also based in ethics, and it's, in a way, it is very practical philosophy. What do we want from life? What do we want to do in life? We want to act correctly and find a peace of mind. And for that, okay, I mean, this sounds really sort of trivial for anybody who's got some sort of good moral or ethical principles. But for him it went much further. We have to clarify the nature of the universe, human life and true reality, and these three components form a unity. Each of them has to be answered. Now, I'm now going to bow to Nick Rossiter and Michael Heather, because on the intellectual side they've done very good work, put together all the possible types of the universe. You can read it, and it's also in their paper, really real numbers, which I hope we still will see in print. I'm not going to read through all of them, because some of them I never heard about. I'm not even ashamed of that. But what is interesting are the current mainstream models, which I have to hide it, which is self-reproducing eternal inflammatory, and postmodern, that really always makes me laugh. Random, probably, anthropic, possible, homemade, naturally selected, fake, with nothing original, Boltzmann's wrap around, quantum, self-creating, colliding, light-dying, hyper-universes, best by the preposterous than public. I mean, you have to question Nick if he is there about it. And we are also not falling far behind, because even a small selection of talks here shows already that we are concerned about the nature of the universe, why the universe is four-dimensional, universal right systems, lattice work of cosmos and physiology as consciousness, which links more to human life. And also, I wouldn't dare to list everything, but we have many philosophical references in various talks for that. And that will be evident when we have the proceedings. Dropping a heavy hint, don't I? So what Nishida says, that true reality has constantly the same formative mode. And this is really the key, and probably I could stop at this. The state of consciousness in which subject and object have resolved into the union of thinking, feeling, and willing is true reality. Independent, self-sufficient true reality manifests itself in the form of this union. We must realize the true state of this reality with our entire being rather than reflect on it, analyze it, express it in words. So, intellect itself is not sufficient, but I would say emotion and intuition is also not sufficient. We need to have the union, the unity of both. What are the implications of this philosophy? Well, the first and obvious one is the beyond duality of object and subject. Easier said than done. And immediately, I'm sure that you have thought about parallel with quantum mechanics. The observer influences the state of the object. I'm not going too far into that because I never really taught the quantum mechanics when I was lecturer in physics. I taught it for one term, and then it was taken away from me because students complained, so I'm rather ignorant. The knowledge of nature ranges from cosmology through condensed matter to elementary particles. Now, you should, some of you who know me know that I'm a condensed matter physicist, and condensed matter is truly the poor cousin of things which are sort of much more posh, like cosmology, not to mention elementary particle. We condensed physicists, we really have to struggle with nature in its macroscopic macroscopic appearances. So this duality of this non-duality, rather, of object and subject does not work on macroscopic level. And that was a paper by Tony Leggett. I'm happy to send the reference. He pointed out that theory of condensed matter cannot, on quite a priori grounds, reduce in all respects to the theory, or at least the current theory, of the microscopic elements composing it. That really made me very happy, because I always intuitively felt that it just cannot work, doesn't work for me. But what it implies, further Tony Leggett, this implies that the quantum mechanics as we know it now must break down, and in time a fundamentally new and exciting realm of physics will emerge. Now, it was some 20 odd years ago, 30 years by now probably. So, is it happening? Yeah, we have some ideas bouncing around, and I'm sure you know a few more. So, one which I really feel could work for me is, in addition to four fundamental quantities, which are three spatial ones and time of current physics, we add consciousness as the fourth independent one, okay? And consciousness is present on molecular level. There are people who show that. I'm not going to take stance on that. And there is also spiritual science, pan-spiritism, as propagated by Steve Taylor. Have your pick. At the moment, there is nothing which is absolutely and truly convincing, which would seamlessly bring consciousness and current physics. When people ask me how can I reconcile it, because I'm Zen master, so the intuitive way rather than working as a physicist, which is intellectual way, I just say there is absolutely no problem. Where is the problem? Physics works very well within the limits that we know. And it has done great things, and it's still moving forward, and we are getting understanding of universe and nature and so, but it's not exhaustive. As long as we acknowledge that it's not exhaustive, that there are things which we currently cannot measure, because no matter whether it's theoretical or experimental physics, We always have to fall back on measurement, reproducible measurement. And beautiful as intuition and meditation and all the sort of parapsychological phenomenon are, it's very difficult to have reproducibility. And I can tell you from my own experience and my masters and my students, no, not a single meditation is the same. They are always different. They are not really what we call reproducible. This is not, we cannot apply the measure of sciences to things like consciousness. I'm not even going into this quagmire of where is the mind, how does the brain work. That's at the moment we have exciting developments in neuroscience, but it's really in its very beginnings, at least for me. Maybe other people are convinced. So that's where we are on the level. And so back to Nishida. So from the perspective of direct knowledge that is free from all assumptions, reality consists only of phenomena of consciousness, namely the facts of direct experience. Any other notion of reality is simply an assumption generated by the demands of thinking. Because the activity of thinking does not go beyond the scope of the phenomena of consciousness, it possesses no mystical ability to intuit a reality above and beyond experience. Assumptions regarding such a reality are abstract concepts formulated so that thinking can systematically organize the facts of direct experience. Okay, so the last sentence is very important. Abstract concepts have to be formulated so that thinking can systematically organize the facts of direct experience. So it's not just sort of random experiences, but it has some coherence to that. Where does it lie? I can always speak, I feel always rather uncomfortable when I have to do philosophical speculations. Because actually my laptop is standing on few books, and one of them is the Oxford Guide to Philosophy, which is quite a thick book. So any philosophy, and most of you I'm sure know quite a bit about Eastern and Western philosophy, and philosophers never really agreed on one idea, which is great. But what is connection to Zen from of Nishida's philosophy? I'm only going to restrict myself to Nishida. So, in Zen we have something which is like the thought impulse, and we call it Nen. That's the Japanese term, which is very hard to really translate. So, all what we perceive happens in 3 stages. So we have 3 Nens. The first one is noticing without judgment, which is direct experience. Well, it's hot today. Or if I would be in the room and I would be sitting, say, next to Peter, I would kick him and he would say, "Ow!" And then he would say, "Oh, what has happened?" "Oh, Barbara kicked me." And then he would say, "Oh, she's really a nasty person." Okay, I assume he would do that. So the second Nen is the illuminating and reflecting action of consciousness, but it still does not know anything about itself, because it sort of says, "Oh, what has happened?" First, it has happened, you register it with your whole body, then, "Oh, something has happened." And then the third Nen is very important because it sort of reflects on the first 2 ones, which is a reflecting action, and that's a further step in self-consciousness. The first 2 Nens have no consciousness, no self-consciousness. So in the example of the temperature, it would be, I noticed, I have been thinking it's hot today. And that's actually when when all the confusion with Westerners comes about, when they talk about cons, they are normally working in the third man. And in the work with Zen practitioners, we drive them all to the first man, to the direct experience. And we do that through koans, and some of the sort of quote-unquote answers are very strange, because it would be maybe a shout, maybe a hit, maybe sort of dropping on the floor, whatever. And this is very hard for a Westerner who is used to sort of intellectual solving of the problems to do. Believe me, I've been there, I've done that, and now I have students who have very similar problems. But that's okay, that's how it works. And I think actually if I would be in the room, we could have a sort of short meditation, but then I thought better of it, because what does it, you really need a bit of a practice to get something of meditation, to touch the reality, because that's one of the messages I'm trying to convey without words, is that in order to touch reality, you have to stop thinking. You have to stop the thought. And only then your body-mind can really touch the you could say the universe crystallizes in you. So I have a little story here, so allow me to read it. Nansen, who was one of the great Zen masters, views the flower. Once, when speaking with Nansen Osho, Riko Taifu said, Johoshi said, heaven and earth and I are of the same root. All things and I are of the same substance. Isn't that fantastic? Nansen pointed to a flower in the garden and said, people of these days see this flower as though they were in a dream. Sergio, the author of the Hekigan Roku, comments on this story in a beautiful verse. Hearing, seeing, touching, and knowing are not one and one. Mountains and rivers should not be viewed in the mirror. The frosty sky, the setting moon, at midnight. With whom will the serene waters of the lake reflect the shadows in the cold? Now, I'm having a book on Zen training by Katsuki Sekida, and it's worth spending a couple of minutes to hear his commentary. Nansen introduced here the problem of cognition. Perhaps it was one of the earliest occasions in the history of Zen on which this problem was taken up so specifically. In the 4 lines of Sergio verse, we find a splendid description of pure cognition. Hearing, seeing, touching, and knowing are not one and one. Mountains and rivers should not be viewed in the mirror. The frosty sky, the setting moon, at midnight. With whom will the serene waters of the lake reflect the shadows in the cold? So, now the commentary. Hearing, seeing, touching represent the auditory, visual, tactile, and other senses. Knowing means cognition. Not one and one means that sensation and cognition are not to be separated from each other. And cognition and the cognized objects are also not strangers to each other, but they are interrelated, which makes transcendental cognition possible. Mountains and rivers represent the external world. The mirror represents your subjectivity. The frosty sky, the setting moon at midnight, expresses the serene and sublime situation in which external object and sensation meet in pure cognition. The serene waters of the lake are your mind, which exercises pure cognition. Reflects the shadows means pure cognition. In the court, again expresses the serene and sublime state of the mind when it exercises pure cognition. The mind is as serene, as silent as the frosty sky, the setting moon, and midnight are purely cold. Okay. So, back to reality from, sorry for the pun, from the poetry. So my current thinking and feeling is that Nishida's philosophy allows the intellectual and the spiritual to coexist peacefully. And only both together can give a full view of reality. And direct experience is the basis and the method of Zazen, of the Zen meditation, all coming back to Sanskrit dhyana. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and I welcome questions. I have to stop sharing screen.
Thank you, Barbara. So, questions from the Zoom audience or from the...
And comments, of course.
Yeah. From the real or the virtual audience?
Any.
There's a question. Peter?
Yes.
So, Barbara, I just asked, how do you react to Jesus' statement that I am the way, the truth, and the life? Is that, how do you react to that?
Sorry, can you repeat it because it's hard to hear? Can you get the microphone closer?
Is this the microphone? Is this the microphone? No.
Press it on. Press
No, the
it on.
microphone's up there.
microphone is
So,
up there, just
how
talking to
do
that.
you react to Jesus' statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life?
Yeah, I mean this is very much in correspondence with Zen, because in some part of my training you have to answer the question, who are you? Okay, and then some answers which are accepted is I am the path, I am the light. There is no difference between, there is no path as such. It's you who is the path, so it's also you who is the light.
So the sense is that the truth is not something you know, but the truth is something that you are.
Yes, I mean it is like your small subjective truth is a part of the big absolute truth, if you like.
Yeah. I would say that what you're calling the Eastern way of thinking plays a lot more part in physics than is generally recognized, because physicists have the feeling that something is right or something is not right, and it's not expressed in equations. Like Einstein couldn't accept quantum mechanics, not because of equations, but because it just wasn't right.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, because when I was very active in my sort of particular branch of physics, the way I was working was like you start a new problem and initially it's just sheer confusion.
Yeah.
It's a mess. And then slowly something starts to form, but it has no words, it has no form. And eventually it takes a form of equation, or sort of, yeah. It's very similar to the way artists work. It's very similar to the way
Getting an echo.
Actually, if I don't know if you remember, but I talked about the two legs of physics.
we have some echo in the Zoom.
Yeah, but Garnet needs to mute it.
I don't know if it's
Garnet,
Garnet.
you need to mute.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I just said, Barbara, if you remember, I talked about the two legs of physics.
Yeah.
So, just to come.
Oh, he's just saying he did. Talk about an aspect in that way.
May
I ask Barbara a question?
Sure.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I'm afraid I couldn't find the raise hand function in the chat to see. I hope I'm not jumping in ahead of anybody.
No.
Mine. Okay, Barbara, thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. Unfortunately, because of problems with the Zoom connection, I'm afraid I only heard the last part of your talk, but thank you very much indeed for it. I'm afraid slightly flying in the face of your warning not to try to assimilate these notions from Zen, particularly of the koan and the nen, to anything in the framework of Western metaphysics or Western philosophical thought. Kind of slightly flying in the face of that, but I just wondered if you get your reaction. There are two, what one might call outliers in the history of broadly Western thought that came to my mind while you were talking about this metaphor of the lake, the reflection, and the distinction between the three names, and only the first name being the koan. And that was Percy's notion of firstness, secondness, and thirdness, which it struck me as having very powerful resonance with what appears to be at the heart of this, well, I don't want to call it a distinction, but this threefold structure within the Zen. And the other was actually the Enneads, the progression of the Enneads from the one in Plotinus. But I'd be particularly interested in getting your reaction, whether you think there's any kind of echo in Percy's ideas of firstness, secondness, and thirdness to what's going on here with the Zen.
I think we should get offline and exchange the references, and I can send you my talk so you can see where I started, because this philosophy, the Nishida's philosophy, is very strongly rooted in William James and others, but especially William James of pure experience. And I don't know William James well enough to be able to pull more similarities, because Nishida went sort of Eastern way more than trying to.
Well, thank you very much, and I look forward very much indeed to getting
that. So let's talk about it.
Thank you again. Thanks for that.
Do we have more comments or questions?
You have more time for lunch?
Yeah. Good to see you, Mike. Good to see you.
You are muted.
Muted.
Yeah.
Sorry, good to see you and all other ANPA friends as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Garnet has his hand raised.
Garnet? Garnet?
I don't want to keep you that nice from lunch, but I too lovely talk, Barbara, and very brave, because lots of scientists are rather hard-nosed about this sort of thing. Maybe one thing, when I gave the talk, remember that the line man, and that there is this thought that well, okay, in a sense that's the beginning of us in terms of consciousness, because it's an indication that we deal with counterfactual. And I do think that science tends to be rather arrogant in the sense that the counterfactuals we deal with are mathematical. They're models. You have to remember, the models are not the reality.
Absolutely.
Eventually, well. Absolutely. Yeah. I do tend to think that the East does better than the West in terms of understanding this, that as individuals, we don't actually live in a world of objects with any certainty, but we live within our senses. We process all the stuff that comes in. And so it's really inside we have to figure out what's going on. That is a difficult thing that I don't think science has yet come terribly close to. And so it's fantastic when you get people like you who see both sides and can tell us about what from one science is the other side. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's you guys gave me really food for thought, but what I've done in the previous ANPA, if you look in the last proceedings, I have written a little paper about Zen and science, the search for meaning. But I want to say I'm doing only with methodology, I'm not dealing with domains, and those are very distinct things, yes? Because methodology, I could show it's very much the same for science, for a scientist with vocation, as for spiritual seeker in Zen. Now, why I'm sort of insisting on Zen? Well, it's about the only thing I know a little about. But also, in Buddhism, you have no God. And Buddhist view of universe is actually quite interesting one, because it doesn't ask itself why the universe exists, who created it, when it was created. It just says, okay, it is there and it works, which is quite interesting. So it's not going back to the problem of creation. I don't know, maybe Diryaman knows a bit more because it goes back to Hindu philosophy. It goes much, yeah. It's not terribly original. But that is very appealing thing for a scientist, because you have no moral conflict, yeah? You cannot pose the question, does God exist, or who created the universe, who created me? Those questions within this framework have no meaning. So you can concentrate on sort of, experientially finding what is the reality and how you experience it. So that's the basis of why I feel quite comfortable being a scientist and a Zenist.
I would agree with that entirely. Just one last comment. I mean, Feynman sort of commented on what he worked on the Manhattan Project, and he said, well, that's just the way it is. It's technically speaking, and it's an attraction to everyone who works in physics and mathematics, and that's it, right? And in some sense, the rock sets in when the technical sweetness and the beauty becomes a religion and stops you from looking at other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, thanks for the talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. I just wanted to share an anecdote actually with one of my teachers. She died 2 years ago. She was 101 years old. And one thing that she said related to this idea of the direct experience is that she had a very discerning eye. She was able to tell when a dancer was using their head or if they were dancing with their body, or if once they slipped into their headspace, they lost it, or how. And she was very good at discerning that. She was like, okay, you're using your head, and you lost it. You had something and you lost it. And so I was remembering that when you mentioned this idea of direct experience, and that's always been something that I keep telling myself to, or try to, don't get into your headspace. Your body knows what to do.
Yeah.
Your body knows what to do, and you just allow it to do what it needs to do. That was my first remark. And the second one is you have in your background you have a circular brush stroke. And you even had that at the end of your slideshow, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this one brush, the circular brush stroke at the back there. I don't know, maybe it's related or unrelated.
Okay, this is the calligraphy by Shinzan Miyama Roshi, my spiritual father, and this is called Enso, very famous symbol for Zen, which means there is no inside or outside, all is one. But again, as the Avalon has said, you have to experience it in order to really feel it. But and that's actually the symbol which is in my on my website, I have a website called Zen Space, which is for for advertising a little bit what I'm doing. So that's the and Zen Space. It's okay when you have many meditative states, but one of them is called in Japanese samadhi, which means there is no time, no space. Everything ceases to exist. So if you look from the outside at the practitioner, this person is still sitting there, nothing disappears, okay? But internally, everything melts, no inside, no outside. Like in your talk about sort of the skin on your hand, where does it sort of melt away? And there is another one when we act, because obviously we need to act. We cannot live in this imaginary space, if you like. And this is also something where we can be completely focused and single-minded. And that's sort of called, the first one was absolute samadhi, the other is positive samadhi. And positive samadhi, if you like, it can be really seen as the flow. If you know the theory of Csikszentmihalyi, that we work best if we are in the flow process. So when everything disappears apart from the work that you have, whether it's calculating, whether it's doing an experiment, whether it's working the garden, you are just one with the activity. So they are similar but not the same. And so that's why I call it Zen space, because we move from one to another, hopefully smoothly.
Sydney?
I hope it answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. Sydney has a question.
Sydney has a
I just
question.
wanted to ask, far as, is there like for Zen, the Zen space, is there like a notion that this dichotomy between the head
Could you come to the microphone? I'm afraid we can't hear you.
Okay, come to the front
Okay,
and speak up to the microphone.
where is the microphone?
Up there.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to find out, for this notion in the Zen, is there a notion or this dichotomy? What I'm asking basically is, you were talking about the Western and the Eastern views of the universe, from what I'm gathering. And the Western is more, from what I picked up, is more about logic and reasoning. And my question is in the Eastern, there's more like this synergy, am I picking that up right? Between, basically what I'm asking is, the dichotomy between the head space and what the body is doing. Is there like a, I forgot where I was going with this, but I did have it. Basically, the universe will, you were saying something, you said something about how it doesn't really matter, these questions, because the universe will go ahead and take care of itself anyway. You know, yeah, and I was asking, is that sort of like related to the fact that you want to have like this reflective space and understanding of what's going on in the universe, but part of your body is already, you're physically in it, so I don't know what I'm saying. I was just trying to figure out, like, I had a thought, but I couldn't complete it. But it's been something like that. Maybe what I'm going through right now is I'm trying to schism two parts that don't need to be schismed, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, the problem in the West came sort of around the times of Voltaire, times of Enlightenment, when religion was split from logic, okay? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, not at all, but that's the historical fact. And without that, we wouldn't have science in the way we have it now, yeah? You could say, all right, but the Chinese, who are definitely Eastern thought, have invented the powder and so, but it is more like thinking with the whole body is a concept which may be familiar to some of you, though you may not realize it. When you are really engaged in an activity and you forget about time and everything, that's when you work with your body. And you work on the problem in physics. It doesn't matter. It's not the type of problem which is important, it's how you attack it, how you deal with it at the time when you are busy with it. And part of Zen is very, very practical. It teaches you how to focus, how to deal with distractions, because even if you are very engaged in your problem, you can have hundreds of stray thoughts like, okay, when did I have the cup of tea last? Yeah.
Yes.
Especially if you are stuck. If you are stuck in difficult problem, oh yeah, I need to make another cup of tea. So what Zen teaches you is, okay, leave this thought aside. It's like a background noise. Right. Go back to the problem you are dealing with. So that is really the one-mindedness when your body and your mind work together.
That's a really good point, because I was going to say that. Oh, sorry. That's a really.
To come to the front if you want to say something.
That's a really good point, because I think that Zen practice could probably be useful for everybody, because there's so many distractions in the world. And if you're very single-minded and you have a goal or a vision and you want to accomplish it, it can probably very much hone your skill in like sorting what's essential and important in the moment versus what's secondary, if you know what I mean.
Oh yes, but there is also another practical implication, switching from one task to another, okay? We teach people how to switch without carrying the previous task, because some of us have this luxury of working on whatever we want and how long we want, but in the work setting, you may have a limited time for a given task, and then you have to give it, either to finish it or leave it at a certain stage and move on to the next task. And I think everybody in the audience knows how difficult it is, especially if say, okay, you are working on your paper, you just got this brilliant idea, but in half an hour time you have to give lecture, okay? So you have to switch your mindset completely, because you are not going to go and face students and say, you know, today you go home because I can't be bothered, I have something much more interesting to do. You may be thinking internally, but you still go and beautifully deliver the lecture.
Right.
And the art is, you know, to forget about it for time being and then be as enthusiastic about the lecture, then switch into something, be as enthusiastic and go back and be able to go back to your paper. So this is really hard. I mean, it takes many years of practice.
Do you think this fuels in some way, sometimes modern form, no, I don't want to say modern, but fuels people's ADHD, that they can't stay with one topic at a time? They just keep switching, or they can't, am I picking up something that you didn't say?
Yes, because there are lots of distractions, and technology is one, mobile phone, for example, or anything else, and also we like some tasks more than the others. It's only very human.
Yeah.
So, there was, I hope that it's going a little bit out now, the multitasking.
I can't do that at all. That's very hard for me.
No, please don't even try, because it's no point. It wastes a lot of time. If you can sort of look out at your time and say, okay, this is really just this task, and stick to it, this brings a lot more. This brings a lot more results and actually happiness. Yeah. Eventually happiness. I know it's a not fashionable word, especially in physics, but happiness is very important.
Yeah.
So, have we got any more comments or questions from either?
Just a very quick one. Happiness is absorption in the task at hand.
Yes.
Quotation from the quotation from Seven Pillars of Wisdom.
Yeah.
Of E. Lawrence, as it happens.
Absolutely.
Income, £20 a year. Expenditure, £19, 19 shillings and sixpence. Happiness. Thank you, Mr. McCorber. Yeah.
Have you also noticed one more thing? Have you noticed how in the past I hear people had a lot longer attention span?
Yes, yeah.
Because they weren't dealing with all this instant gratification of today's modern. Now, I'm not poo-pooing that. I'm not saying it's that we shouldn't progress, but I'm just saying that it's changing our attention spans.
Yeah, okay, thank you everybody very much again, but before we finish, can I ask that somebody checks on Nicola?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
heat stroke.
Nicola was not feeling well,
Yes,
and the problem is that she left her phone at home, okay? So she's in Albert's court. So if somebody could either ring the Albert's court so they can check what she's doing, or maybe even pass as a sort of walk during lunch, that would be really appreciated. I would have phoned her, but she left her phone at home, and that's what actually caused the problem with the lecture by Eddie Billy Moria. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, we have a... Thank you very much, Barbara, for that. It's really important to talk about these things. Now, we have a lunch break now. We're cutting it shorter than we would have done.